You know that feeling. You bump into some thinker, some big idea, and it feels, well, profound. But the more you try and grab hold of it, the more it just slips away.
Yeah, like trying to nail jelly to a wall sometimes.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of why we're here. Welcome to the deep dive. Think of us as your shortcut, helping you navigate those tricky subjects without, drowning in the jargon.
Right. We do the heavy sifting, pull out the core stuff, and hopefully lay it out in a way that makes sense. Kind of like intellectual map making, maybe.
I like that. And today we are plunging into Jacques Lacan. He was a French psychoanalyst, psychiatrist, lived in 1901 to 1981. And get this, he's been called the most controversial psychoanalyst since Freud.
Which definitely makes you lean in, doesn't it?
It does. We've been looking at these excerpts from a text called Philosophia de Jacques Lacan. It gives us biography, breaks down his main concepts, and crucially, it doesn't shy away from the criticisms. Okay, so our mission today basically is to give you a clear, engaging overview. Lacan's influence, the debates, the whole shebang, but without getting totally lost. We want the essentials, the nuggets.
Yeah, we're shooting for those aha moments.
Yeah.
Where you see why his thinking spread into philosophy, cultural theory, post-structuralism, feminist theory, film studies, and obviously psychoanalysis itself. He's one of those figures people either seem to revere or, well, completely dismiss. Pretty intriguing.
Absolutely. Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Who was Jacques Lacan?
Well, he was born in Paris, comfortable background, and interestingly, his early passion was philosophy. That actually led him away from his family's Catholicism towards atheism, and he got involved with the whole Parisian avant-garde scene in the 20s, surrealists, writers.
So not exactly your standard medical student path.
Not at all. He was rubbing shoulders with people like James Joyce, Andre Breton, Salvador Dali, even Picasso. Apparently, he was Picasso's therapist for a bit.
Wow, okay.
So that early immersion in art and literature definitely shaped his thinking later on.
Right, but he did do the medical training.
Oh, yes. He studied medicine, specialized in psychiatry, worked at Sainte Anne Hospital, which is a big deal. He even qualified as a forensic psychiatrist. So he was definitely engaged with the practical side, the legal side of mental health, too.
And the psychoanalysis part, how did that start?
He joined the Paris Psychoanalytic Society, the SPP, back in the 30s as a candidate. And he did his own training analysis with Rudolf Lowenstein, who was a pretty major figure. He actually presented his first ideas on the mirror stage at an international psychoanalysis conference.
Didn't that presentation get, cut short or something?
That's the story, yeah.
Or-
Ernest Jones was chairing, and apparently he just cut Lacan off when his time was up. No extension. It's a small thing, maybe, but it kind of foreshadows the friction that came later with the establishment.
Okay. And that mirror stage idea itself, what were the big influences there?
Two main things really stand out. First, Alexander Koshev's lectures on Hegel were huge in Paris then, especially the ideas about the self being formed through recognition by others, that master-slave dialectic idea.
Uh-huh.
And second, the work of Henri Wallin, a developmental psychologist who studied how kids develop their body image. Lacan really drew on those for his early formulation.
And he had a personal life too, presumably.
Yes, he married Marie-Louise Blondin in 34, had 3 kids. Then later, after the war, he got together with Sylvia Bataille. She'd been married to his friend Georges Bataille.
Right.
They married in 53 and had a daughter.
Right.
His wartime experience is interesting, too. The SPP was shut down by the Nazis. He served briefly in the army, but also spent time studying Chinese. He even got a diploma. After the war, things picked up again with the SPP, and he went to England, met analysts like Beyond, Jones again, Rickman.
Okay, so that gives us a picture of the man, now his big project, this return to Freud. What did he actually mean by that? What was the goal?
Fundamentally, it was about getting back to Freud's original texts. Lacan felt psychoanalysis, especially the American flavor, ego psychology, and even some object relations folks, it kind of drifted. They'd lost sight of what he saw as Freud's most radical insights, particularly about the unconscious. He wanted to pull the focus back there.
And language was central to this for him, right? The unconscious in language.
Absolutely central. Lacan looked at Freud's analysis of slips of the tongue, jokes, dreams. And he argued that Freud was basically showing how language structures our reality, our sense of self, and how the unconscious works. This leads us to, well, probably his most famous line, the unconscious is structured like a language.
Okay, that phrase, it gets thrown around a lot. Let's unpack it. What was he really getting at? He don't mean the unconscious is literally French or English, did he?
No, not at all. It's more that it operates according to similar underlying principles. Think about how language works. Meaning comes from the relationship between words, the structure of the system. He saw the unconscious operating with a similar kind of differential logic. But, and this is crucial, He was careful. He didn't say they had the exact same structure. And importantly, the I, the subject, isn't just the speaker controlling the language. There's a split.
That sounds like it would have ruffled some feathers. The sources mention disagreements?
Oh, definitely. André Green, another major French analyst, really pushed back hard. He pointed out that Freud himself made a distinction. The unconscious deals in thing presentations, raw feelings, images. The preconscious is where word presentations live. So for Green, Lacan was mixing up categories Freud kept separate.
Uh-huh.
Although Dylan Evans brings up Lacan's own readings of Freud, like the difference between Das Ding and Die Sache, suggesting Lacan's view might be more complex than just equating the two.
And wasn't there also the suspicion that this whole return to Freud was just, well, a cover for Lacan to push his own theories?
Exactly. Green actually accused him pretty bluntly of intellectual dishonesty, said the return was just a convenient way to legitimize his own innovations. It shows you how intense these debates could get.
Right. Okay, so language structure, very key. Let's dive into some of those core concepts now. The mirror stage, we mentioned it earlier. What's the essence of it?
So the mirror stage, Lukian placed it typically between, say, 6 and 18 months. It's fundamentally about how our ego, our sense of I, actually gets formed. It starts with the infant literally seeing its reflection.
Just seeing yourself in the mirror, how does that create an I?
Well, think about it. The baby at that age feels kind of fragmented, uncoordinated, right?
Yeah.
Its limbs don't quite obey yet. But then it sees this image in the mirror, whole, complete, unified.
Ah, okay.
And there's this moment of Lacan called it jubilation, where the baby identifies with that whole image. It sort of says, that's me. It grasps this unified form in contrast to its messy internal experience. That identification is the initial formation of the ego.
So our basic sense of self is based on an image, almost an illusion.
Precisely. That's the concept of McConaissance misrecognition. The ego is built on identifying with something external, an image that isn't quite the real, messy, lived experience. So yeah, the I is founded on a kind of necessary illusion. He also mentioned a flip side to the jubilation, a potential depression, when the gap between that ideal image and the felt reality sinks in.
And it's not just about literal mirrors later on, is it?
No, exactly. It becomes a kind of template for all future identifications. We see ourselves reflected in others and ideals, and that shapes who we think we are. And Lacan stressed it's not just visual. There's usually an adult there, the other, who points and says, look, that's you, validating the image. That social dimension is key.
Okay, the other. That leads us nicely into the next big concept. He talks about the big other and the little other. What's the difference there? It seems important.
Very important distinction. The little other, sometimes written A, is basically other people like us, our peers, rivals, the people we compare ourselves to, the image in the mirror. It's the realm of the imaginary order, all about identification, reflection, projection.
Okay, so like my reflection or maybe my colleague I'm competing with.
Kind of, yeah. It operates on that level of image and comparison.
Yeah.
But the big other, written A, is something else entirely.
Yeah.
It's the symbolic order itself. Language, laws, social rules, cultural codes.
Yeah.
The whole system that exists before us and shapes us.
So like the law or just language itself.
Both and more. It's the treasure trove of signifiers, the shared understanding that makes society function. Lacan said speech always comes from the other, which is why he could say the unconscious is the discourse of the other. Our unconscious thoughts are structured by this symbolic system we're born into.
Hmm.
And he also talked about the barred other, A with a slash through it. That signifies that the other, the symbolic order, is never actually complete. There's always a lack, a gap, something missing, and that lack is what keeps desire going.
Wow, okay. That's quite abstract, but I think I'm getting the shape of it. Let's try the phallus next. Capital P. I know it's not. Literally.
Right. Definitely not the biological penis. In Lacan's system, the phallus, is purely a symbolic signifier. It represents, well, the ultimate signifier of desire, of power, of completeness within that symbolic order we just discussed. It's what everyone supposedly wants, the thing that would make you whole, but which no one actually has. It signifies that lack in the other.
The ultimate unobtainable thing, sort of?
Sort of, yes. It functions as the marker of desire itself, generated by that fundamental lack.
And this has been, understandably, a big topic for feminist thinkers, hasn't it?
Hugely. You have some feminists like Ronell, Gallup, Gross, mentioned in the sources, who found the concept useful for analyzing patriarchal structures, how power works through language. They saw it as a tool to critique phallocentrism.
But others push back hard.
Oh, yeah. Luce Irigaray is probably the most famous critic here. She argued Lacan's phallus just reinforces a male-centric view. a binary of having or not having, and fails to account for feminine specificity or desire outside that framework. So deep disagreement there.
Really shows how these ideas get taken up and debated. Okay, the big three: the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. Plus this later idea, the synthome. Can you walk us through those?
Okay, these three are like the fundamental coordinates of experience for Lacan. They're always intertwined, knotted together. The imaginary, we've touched on this, is the realm of images, identifications, the mirror stage stuff, illusions of wholeness, rivalry, the ego. It's visual, pre-linguistic in a way.
Right, mirror stage territory.
Exactly. Then this is the big others territory: language, law, structure, culture. It's the world of signifiers, where meaning is made through difference. The Oedipus complex happens here, inserting the child into the social order. It structures the imaginary.
Okay. And the real.
Yeah.
This one always feels the most asleep.
It is. The real is not reality as we commonly understand it. It's what lies outside the symbolic, what resists being captured by language. Think trauma, raw existence, the impossible kernel that language can circle around but never fully grasp. It's what doesn't fit. It's often linked to anxiety because it's unstructured, unmediated. There's no lack in the real. Things just are, which is terrifying in a way.
So like the raw horror of an accident before you can process it, or...
Something like that. It's
Yeah.
that which escapes symbolization. Now, the synthome. This was a later idea Lacan developed, especially in his work on James Joyce. It's like a fourth ring in this Borromean knot he used to visualize the orders. The synthome is the unique way each individual knots together, the real, symbolic, and imaginary. It's related to the symptom, but seen less as something to be cured and more as the core, singular way a person manages to hold themselves together, their unique mode of jouissance or enjoyment.
their unique knot.
Interesting. Okay, that framework helps. Let's talk about desire. It's not just wanting something, in Lacan's view, different from Freud's Wunsch. Right. It's closer maybe to Hegel's Begierde, an ongoing force, a fundamental lack of being, not just a specific wish. For Lacan, desire is inherently unconscious, and the whole point of analysis is really for the subject to recognize and articulate their own singular desire.
But it's not like it's just sitting there waiting to be found.
No, that's key. Lacan says desire only properly exists when it's spoken, articulated in the presence of the other, the analyst, for instance. But language can never fully capture it. There's always a remainder, a gap between what's said and the desire itself. He distinguished it from need biological urges like hunger, which get articulated as demand, like a baby demanding food. But demand always includes a demand for love, for recognition, which can never be fully met. So desire is what's left over when you subtract the satisfaction of need from the demand for love. That famous quote. Desire is neither the appetite for satisfaction nor the demand for love, but the difference that results from the subtraction of the first from the second. It's that something else that keeps us searching. It's metonymic, always shifting.
And that really dense phrase, the desire of man is the desire of the other. What's going on there?
Yeah, that's a classic. It works on multiple levels. It can mean we desire to be desired by the other. We want recognition. Or we desire what the other desires. We learn what's desirable from others, from culture. Or it can point to the foundational, unconscious desire for the primordial other, usually the mother. And it also means desire itself emerges in the field of the other, within language and the unconscious. The law of the father, in Lacan's thinking, is what helps break the child away from being totally consumed by the mother's desire, allowing entry into the broader social world.
Okay, that's a lot packed into one phrase. Finally, in this concept section, drive, la pulsion, how's that different from instinct?
Again, following Freud's distinction, tribe versus instinct. Instincts have a clear biological aim and object, like a bird building a nest. They can be satisfied. Drives, for Lacan, are different. They don't aim for satisfaction in the same way. They sort of circulate around an object. And the satisfaction, the jouissance, comes from the repetitive path itself, not reaching a goal.
Like endlessly scrolling social media, maybe? The act itself.
That's not a bad modern analogy, actually. It's the circuit itself. Drives are partial. They're not unified. Lacan focused on four: oral, mouth; anal excretion; sasapic, seeing, being seen; and invicurary, hearing, being heard. They're linked to erogenous zones, but are fundamentally shaped by the symbolic order. And he saw them as connected to the death, drive this relentless, excessive repetition beyond the pleasure principle. They're like fragmented expressions of that underlying singular desire.
Wow, okay. These concepts are incredibly layered. Now, the sources also get into his clinical work and the controversies. Those variable length sessions sound pretty radical.
Highly radical. And probably the biggest flashpoint.
Oh.
Standard psychoanalysis had the 50-minute hour, very structured. Lacan threw that out. Sessions could be minutes, even seconds sometimes, or go on much longer. His idea was to use the timing, the cut, the interruption as a therapeutic tool itself to punctuate a key moment, disrupt defenses, highlight transference.
But you can imagine the psychoanalytic establishment wasn't thrilled.
Not even slightly. The IPA, the main international body, saw it as completely unorthodox, unethical even. Critics worried about exploitation. How do you charge for a 5-minute session? They questioned if real analytic work could happen. Some compared his interventions to cryptic, Delphic utterances.
Yeah, the source mentions Kristeva's critique, too.
Right, Julia Kristeva argued he was trying to impose a technical structure on the fundamentally timeless nature of the unconscious experience in analysis, which she thought was misguided. And the sheer number of patients he reportedly saw in a day fueled suspicion.
And this was a big part of why he eventually split from the IPA.
A huge part. His methods, his theoretical challenges to orthodoxy, it all led to the IPA demanding he be removed from the training analyst list at the Paris Society, SPP. When the SPP eventually gave into that pressure, Lacan basically lost his official standing to train analysts within that mainstream structure. So in 1964, he went off and founded his own school, École Freudienne de Paris, the EFP. The clinical practice was absolutely central to the split.
Okay, so his way of doing therapy was as controversial as his ideas. Let's shift to the broader critiques of the ideas themselves. The sources lay out some pretty strong ones.
They really do. A major theme is the lack of empirical grounding. Michael Billig points out that, for all the discussion in humanities departments, Lacanian concepts haven't really been put to the test scientifically. Dylan Evans goes further, basically saying the whole thing is built on a faulty view of human nature.
And the language,
Yeah.
the infamous difficulty.
Yeah, Evans also suggests the obscurity isn't profound depth, but maybe just, confusion masked by jargon. That's a common criticism.
What about his use of linguistics? Saussure came up earlier. That was criticized too.
Yes, heavily. Norman Holland's critique is significant. He argues first that the Saussurean linguistics Lacan relied on is pretty outdated in modern linguistics, like using pre-Newtonian physics today, is his analogy with phlogiston. Right. And second, Holland points out Saussure was trying to make linguistics less psychological, more objective. Lacan then takes these linguistic ideas and uses them to explain the mind, kind of reversing Saussure's project.
Other criticisms mentioned. Things like lack of coherence, ethical issues again.
Yes, the source mentions Nick Land's critique about a lack of flows, and Raymond Tallis's assessment is scathing, calling him the shrink from hell. Tallis brings up the session lengths again: money, disturbing reports about patient suicides, alleged misunderstandings of basic neurology. Camille Paglia is quoted condemning him too. Richard Webster talks about a cult-like atmosphere and intellectual intimidation.
So really fundamental attacks on both the theory and the practice, even his use of math.
That too. Sokol and Brickman, in Fashionable Nonsense, took aim at his use of topology and mathematical formulas. They argued he misused concepts, borrowed the prestige of math without understanding it, creating things that look rigorous but are essentially meaningless. Not even wrong was their famous verdict on some of it.
So across the board, incomprehensible, maybe charlatanism, ethically dubious. The sources list Chomsky, Evans, Scruton, Onfray. Lots of heavy hitters were deeply critical.
It's a formidable list of critics, definitely highlights the deep skepticism his work generated. But then the source does give Zizek the last word on that front.
Ah, yes.
Q, in his typical style, apparently dismisses the complaints about difficulty as class propaganda of the enemy, which, is certainly one way to frame it. It just shows how polarized things remain.
But despite all that criticism, you can't deny his influence, can you? It seems huge.
Absolutely undeniable. Even with the fiercest critiques, his ideas have seeped into so many areas. Philosophy, literary theory, film studies, cultural studies. His concepts are part of the toolkit now for many academics. And even clinically, while maybe not mainstream in the Anglosphere, there are active Lacanian societies, training programs. The source mentions specific examples like Andy Rogers using his ideas in trauma work, or the Gifric group in Quebec applying them to psychosis. So clearly, many people continue to find real value and insight there.
So we have really covered a lot of ground here today. Lacan's life, the return to Freud, those core concepts mirror stage. The three orders, desire, drive, then the clinical controversies, the mountain of criticism, and yet this persistent, wide-ranging legacy. It's a lot.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Given how intense the feelings are, both for and against him, What is it about Lacan's work? Why does it continue to provoke and fascinate, even with all the difficulty and criticism? What does that tell us about maybe our own desire to grapple with the mind's complexity and the strange power of language itself?
That's a great question to chew on. Thinking about those intense reactions, if someone listening is intrigued, despite the warnings, how should they even approach him? What are the potential rewards or the traps of diving deeper into Lacan? It feels like figuring out that tension between genuine insight and potential obfuscation is maybe part of the challenge itself.
I think that's well put. For anyone whose interest has been piqued, maybe pick one specific concept that resonated, or perhaps follow the trail of a particular critic or defender. Sometimes understanding the fight around the ideas is as enlightening as the ideas themselves.
Well, thanks for joining us on this particular deep dive. We hope we've perhaps made the complex, sometimes bewildering world of Jacques Lacan feel just a little more navigable.
Hope so.
Until next time.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.